It's Sella, Greg, Jonah, another amazing episode of Zag Talk. Hey, gang. Don't everyone chime in at once. We got a lot to get through today, and I'm really excited about the guest later on, Missy Cummings, director of George Mason University's Autonomy and Robotics Center, also a former fighter pilot. So she's got a lot of energy she's going to bring to this conversation about why the AV future might not be as prevalent as some boosters say. But before we talk about AVs, let's talk about something a little bit more humble, the bicycle. Sella, kick us off.
Yes. So yesterday I went to the London launch of its Urban Microhub Alliance, which is basically this coalition that's involving car parking operators, an e-mobility operator called Port, and Deliveroo and other logistics players. And it's basically this widespread city-wide network that's aiming to really scale sustainable deliveries across London. So it's starting off with 22 microhubs, and it's kind of merging food delivery, sustainable deliveries, as well as parcel logistics. And it just, the launch was great. And it seems like they've really thought about everything with it, from kind of obviously rider safety and tackling illegal e-bike behavior, but then also we have the opposite problem of what I'm sure you guys have, which is empty car parking spaces increasingly becoming more empty, with London pushing vans and cars out of the city. So it's kind of repurposing urban space as well. So it's a
Heaven
good concept.
forbid. I like that you call them car parks, of course, always so British versus just saying parking
Parking
lot.
lots.
But yeah, so the idea is basically put the hub where you get your courier e-bike to take your delivery order or your Amazon order, and basically have a sort of logical little center for that versus just doing it all on the sidewalk, right?
Yeah, exactly. So having vans come in, as far as they need to go in, and then just driving away again, and having bikes do the rest of the way. And also using kind of one site for both food delivery and parcel logistics, rather than kind of a fragmented system that we have, I'm sure, in many cities.
It makes sense to have a little bit of coordination here. That's what society's all about.
And then also in London, we had the new Lime Bike launch, which we attended a couple of weeks ago. So I know that that's already rolled out across markets in the US, Australia, and Europe. So I know that London's one of the last of a kind of phased rollout. But this bike, have you seen it? It's literally called Lime Bike.
I've seen it. It looks like a Lime bike.
Yeah,
I always
perfect.
struggle to kind of differentiate their hardware. It's like this one's like got a slightly different swoop to it. I don't know, but I mean they make nice looking, eye catching green white bikes and scooters, so I'm here for it.
Yeah, and this is another very green average Lime Bike, but the way that they're marketing it is trying to close. Well, I think what we took from it was really trying to close the gender gap in micromobility. So it's things like a shifted center of gravity, a lower basket, a step-through frame, to kind of bring in more female riders, more older riders, and close, the very stubborn gap in micromobility. So that was great to see as well.
Have you ridden one yet?
I haven't, no.
I want for the next episode. Got to have a ride report. Got to get on there and tell us if it's all it's cracked up to be.
Yeah, I'll tell you if it's suited for women. I'll ride it with heels on.
Thank you. That's all we ask on this podcast.
Just for you guys.
Well, shifting things over to the US, but still on two wheels, DoorDash has put out what I thought was a really interesting report about two-wheelers taking off, basically showing that two-wheel delivery, bikes, scooters, mopeds, maybe a couple of the motorcycles, have grown 4 times as fast as automotive-based deliveries. And in some cities, it's like the preponderance of deliveries are done on two wheels. So like Sunnyvale, a bunch of Bay Area burbs, it's like 75% of deliveries are done on two wheels. And then you had a bunch of kind of more or less what you'd expect: coastal cities, the New Yorks, the Los Angeleses, the San Franciscos, Philadelphia, sort of in the 50 to 60%. And then at the very bottom of that list, you had I think it was like Houston, Dallas, San Antonio at like 8%. So Texas kind of stay Texasing. I don't know. Greg, thoughts?
Let me check the spot price of Brent crude right now, or WTI, since we're talking about Texas here, and let's see how that percentage changes there. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, it's the best way to do it. It's the best carbon and energy cost. And yes, I'm only half kidding. We will see how Americans adapt to this. And this is always the line from like Serve Robotics, right? Don't deliver a 2-pound burrito with a 2-ton car. I misparaphrased that, but it's the same thing.
That's the gist of it. What I found particularly interesting about this was like, and it's not just that there's like, it's cheaper, you should do it for that reason, but it's actually more efficient in like every sense of the word, that These deliveries are usually done 10% faster because you don't spend time, parking in the back and then walking from the car. You can just put the bike, right up next to the shop window. You don't spend time in traffic, obviously, if you're in a dense city center. So there's honestly no reason not to be on a bike other than perilous infrastructure in many cities. So if we can solve that,
Oh,
utopia is on
if we
hand.
could just solve
If we
that.
could just
But
snap our
yes.
fingers and solve that, bring some of your, British planning here, please.
No, but the only thing I'd agree with you there is I think the most interesting part of that story is kind of all those side benefits. Another one being that riders record an average of 10% more income per hour spent on the app, which I just thought was really interesting. And yeah, it's exactly as you're saying, like two-wheelers is just the best way for everyone.
Yeah. Well, if two-wheelers are more
And
efficient
well,
than four-wheelers, I think one-wheelers maybe even more efficient. Imagine how well would you tip a unicycling DoorDash driver?
that's a good question. We'll find out in Montreal. If Stella's job is to ride the Line Bike, let me see if I can find some unicyclists here from the Cirque du
That's
Soleil,
true.
like,
I
roster
shouldn't
here to
make light
deliver
of
that.
Montreal's favorite pastime.
We can figure that part out. But
I'm
also,
look
I think that ties next to our next item with DoorDash too, in the way, because like, yes, it's also a function. It is truly a function of people who, yes, are dashing because they need the money, probably want to have lower costs than spending it all on $4 a gallon gasoline. But Dash not content to simply do deliveries. What are they doing now, Jonah? What is
Yeah,
the
so
future?
they're choosing tasks, basically a platform for doing anything and everything as a gig worker. So basically, like data labeling, starting with menus and kind of restaurant more focused tasks, but eventually they're launching a new app that's going to basically be training data for this whole, vision based robotics future that may or may not be coming. Uber actually had a similar announcement a couple of months back too. So it's, I think, pretty interesting to see this big push into, like world models and physical AI. And it's in a way, to me, it almost makes sense. Like DoorDash launched a robot that's going to do deliveries. So what are the couriers going to do? They're going to be labeling data for the robots.
Well, maybe we'll come back to this in a moment because there's a related item to this that I want to touch upon too. But I don't know. I'm more in the camp with like Benedict Evans, who his newsletter was pointing out that like it's easy to conflate the two. That DoorDash is doing this internally, but like if we're all just training data now, if everything is training data, then just basically just launching a flat platform to capture all Dasher's spare moments to turn them to training data makes a lot of sense. I mean, my riff on this is like we used to say data is the new oil. Like now data is the new plasma, as in like giving plasma for money here. Dash your entire life. So basically you can teach a robot how to basically eventually do the jobs that you were doing as a dasher. But there we are.
Yeah, strap a camera on your head, strap a camera on your stomach, on your pants, record it all.
People are
We'll
too.
suss it out later.
The Verge had a whole piece in this too, and it's things like those kinds of tasks are things like, yeah, doing your dishes or just being in the world. Like, I mean, it is kind of a sort of really Black Mirror-ish thing of like we're just trying to train machines to do the quotidian tasks of daily life here, and get paid a hourly wage
Then,
doing it.
all humans can just have leisure.
I think that's what Keynes wanted. I'm not so sure about how our overlords feel about that now, but yeah.
And what I feel like we've seen a couple other interesting developments that sort of point in this direction too. No?
Yeah, well, the notion of labeling. So, to me, the most interesting non-story happening at the moment is the like moral panic right now happening about Pokemon Go. So, there's been the whole raft of coverage here and it was an announced partnership that Niantic Spatial, which is the company that has emerged after they sold off the game to a Saudi entity, but the core engineering team is now Niantic Spatial, and they're leveraging all this data for a visual positioning system, centimeter level maps of reality. Decided to deal with Coco, where they're going to help guide it. Suddenly there's just all this coverage here of all these people like mourning their childhoods of all the time they spent checking in to chase Pikachu, and now it's being purposed for robotics. To me, it's very funny. Niantic has been talking about this for openly for 4, maybe 5 years. When I wrote my report for Cornell Tech, I started with this, and Niantic was always clear. Like they bootstrapped Pokemon Go using Ingress, and they're bootstrapping all their sort of stuff there. So it's interesting about, to me, what it says about the fact that like, now, yeah, number one, like we are all in fact training data, and then number two is it's just been sort of hiding in plain sight. But it's just
No, no
just
one
goes to
reads
show you,
the no
startup
one reads
founders,
the
you can get
terms and conditions, Greg.
exactly, folks, you can get away with anything, and you got like a 4-year head start before people even notice. That's my takeaway on that. But yeah, even your childhood dreams, you're just training data. Jonah,
What a
there's still
time
a
that
billion a
was.
billion dollars in revenue from that one, millions of users worldwide, and again, for those of you looking for investable commodities, apparently Pokemon cards have in fact outpaced the S&P 500, especially in the current economic moment. So get into those
Wow.
cards. Yeah, find your
Pokemon
collection,
cards are the
Jonah.
new oil.
Yes.
Well, speaking of bleak dystopian future, anyone that's listened for too long knows that Greg and I just love SPACs. We don't love them in the literal sense. We just love talking about them. I don't know. It's our personal moral panic. But so Trevor Milton, maybe the SPAC king, ran Nikola, which is an electric truck company that forgot to make the trucks work.
I will never forget the video of the truck rolling downhill, apparently under its own power, the best visual trick of any marketing video of all time. Who knew he'd go to jail for that? But there we are.
Who knew? A different era of accountability. But so basically, Nikola was briefly worth more than Ford, and then it became worth zero after what was that a Hindenburg report that brought him down?
Yeah, I think it was, in fact.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was one of their greatest hits,
love that. But so
literally and
basically,
figuratively.
was convicted of being a fraudster and was then pardoned by Trump. You know, second chances. Hey, hey, and now he's back. And I don't know. There's just such a great line in this Wall Street Journal story. Other rich people saying, "We can trust you now." That he's part of the big fraud club. And so, what is he doing? He's now doing a electric airplane startup called Cyberjet, spelled Syeber. And I think that makes sense when you know this company's been around for like 40 years. They've never really made it, had a bunch of different twists and turns and money burnt. But this time the jets are electric and they're somehow AI powered. So, if you get a call from Trevor and he's looking for SPAC money, buyer beware.
There you go. It's that time, right? I mean, the perfect pairing with this piece, of course, is Travis Kalanick taking CSS, renaming it Atoms, which has happened, and then partnering up with his old buddy Lewandowski, who, of course, I believe was penalized in some form. I forget if he did jail time, but for stealing trade secrets to bring over to his AI startup. So all these guys who were disgraced, are back because what's a little lack of accountability between friends here. It's 2026.
Ability, accountability.
There's money to be made.
There's money to be made. And so if you like to go fast and play loose
and break things,
have we got the state for you? Stella, have you ever been to Florida?
No.
Can you imagine what a Florida might be like? Like, do you have a kind of mental model of Florida?
Beaches and now 80 miles per hour speed limits.
So this is where I dropped the trailer for Grand Theft Auto 6 into the chat for Sella to look at there. Yeah.
Yes. So Florida, the House there just voted to raise highway speed limits to 80 miles per hour. That's fast. That might be even faster than Montana. And they're also axing registration stickers because if you're going that fast, it's just gonna be a blur anyways, right? It doesn't matter. And so for a state with like lots of elderly people on the roads, what could go wrong? I'm just a little
And
natural
gators.
selection experiment.
So how's this going to work out in the Everglades, man? You're still going to be in a crawl, whether it's because of gators through the Everglades or just bumper to bumper on I-90. But
yeah, I'm sure this will solve traffic on I-95. If you're just going so fast, you'll never stop. But I feel like this also ties nicely with the kind of story that Greg hinted at the beginning too. Gas is friggin' expensive. So what? Brent oil prices briefly touched 119 in the U.S. A gallon of sweet, delicious oil is around $4 these days, and that's the nationwide average. In California, it's like $1,000.
And I would say globally too. I mean, I'm sure listeners will bore you, but there's shortages across East Asia. All that oil that goes out of the Strait of Hormuz that goes bound for Southeast Asia, the Philippines, Indonesia. Rationing is happening here. It's amazing how quickly that supply chain bullwhip cracked.
So how much is a pint of petrol in your writing?
Do you have a jerry can? Do you get it in a jerry can?
We do it by liter. And yes. That is, I don't know what that's now. £1.40? I don't know what that's in dollars. $1.
It's expensive because that's also not that much gas. But Sella stays on her bicycle and she's not bothered by these petrol problems.
Yeah, in our empty car parks.
We'll publish
shows. They'll be much emptier now.
But to me, the dark irony of this entire thing, right? And Gabe Klein, of course, many of the audience know Gabe. Of course, he's most recently an advisor to the Biden White House on electrification. But yeah, there's a lot of dark chatter on various forms of social about, right, just as the major OEMs are abandoning their EV efforts, Stellantis just throwing it in the trash because they say consumers don't want this stuff. Suddenly we have the mother of all oil shocks. Let me say that 5 times fast. And yes, and there's reports coming from Asia where like VinFast showrooms and BYD showrooms across the Philippines are being slammed and booking months worth of orders in weeks here as people realize they cannot commute at the rates they were doing without oil. So it feels like this is like, and someone wrote a piece, I forget who, bad show notes here. They're like, China is the first winner of this war in the sense of the EV transition will now get shoved into overdrive and only China will be in a position to win it because they have the models.
Yes.
Didn't walk it back.
Literally this morning, Sony Honda announced they were canceling their Collab EV because Honda had basically killed the body it was going to be built on a week
Honda,
before,
which
and like
just posted its
forgot
first
to
loss ever.
tell Sony. But I mean, the one silver lining could be a blip in increasing transit ridership. Obviously, it depends where you are. If you don't have a bus, you're not going to be able to take the bus. But previous research shows about a 1.2% rise in transit usage for every 10% increase in gas prices. Obviously, it takes some time for the effect to ripple through. But
That's
you know,
great too, Jordan. If I wanted to lose weight, I could cut off my arm. I mean, I don't think that'll help with the public perception of it that poor people ride transit, though. So that's, we'll
I don't
see.
think it'll help, but obviously part of the reason why the US uses so little transit is because gas is so dang cheap here, right, compared to other countries. So it's a rightening of a certain wrong, but yeah, damn is it gonna hurt.
Well,
So
we'll see.
I don't know. But thank you, Trump, the eco warrior.
We have a 15-point peace plan in. It is interesting to see Brent recover a little bit there. I can't imagine things are going to go back to normal ever. There's no normal anymore, but it will be interesting to see what lessons are learned out of this. Just like the first oil shock in 73, led directly to the intervention of the Japanese automakers into the U.S. market. Is this the moment where China breaks through, especially now that they've got a toehold into Canada, for example? I'm curious
Thank
to
you for
see.
bringing back to Canada. Yes, maybe there'll be peace in the Middle East. That's how we have 2,000 paratroopers ready to hand deliver the peace accords.
American Airborne will get it done. Don't worry.
Bleak world, but at least we might have autonomous vehicles that will be generally electric. So let's kick things over to my conversation with Missy Cummings. And we're back. Today we're joined by Missy Cummings. Really excited about this guest in particular. Missy has an amazing background. So she was one of the U.S. Navy's first female fighter pilots, and she was the NHTSA's senior advisor for safety. And now she serves as director at GMU's Autonomy and Robotics Center. And I'm sure I'm missing a bunch of other accolades, but hey, Missy, good to see you.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
What a bio. I think your reputation speaks for itself, but just to kind of start with an anecdote. So you and I first met, we were at like a mobility automotive investor summit a few months back, and you were giving a talk on the state of AVs. And it was just like a masterclass and you deflating the balloons of a bunch of, like people that thought they knew better and thought they knew everything and were like had never been challenged on some of their assumptions. They're like, oh, AVs aren't just a panacea, and like, oh, there's actually some questions to be had. And so watching you just like burst the bubbles of like a bunch of car dude blowhards, I loved it. So
They
a golf
recover
clap.
quickly though, and now they're all in on ChatGPT. So, trust me.
Yes. I'm sure that their armor is only briefly dented.
That's right. That's right.
The to be a tech bro or a car bro that holds facts so dearly, whether they're true or not. Anyways, like, why don't we get a little bit into your background besides my brief synopsis? Tell us about Missy.
Well, I mean, I thought you did a pretty good job summarizing it. I mean, if I were to put it in a nutshell, yeah, I did spend the first 10 years of my life flying fighters for the military. I picked up a master's degree during that same time. And there's nothing like flying fighters to really make you annoying in all walks of life because you think you can do everything by yourself. And it continues into my later years of life. I feel like if I'm not warring with somebody, I'm just not happy, right? So I have to pick. I am the modern instantiation of Don Quixote. There's not a windmill that I won't tilt at. And when I moved into academia, I always was interested in righting the wrong that I saw inside of naval aviation, which was the planes were designed so poorly that I saw many of my friends die. When I flew F-18s in the 3 years that I flew them, on average, one person a month died the whole 3 years. And it was never war. It was always man-machine interface gone wrong. And so that really motivated me to go back to school. I got my PhD in cognitive systems engineering. And then, I was unleashed on the world. And my first 10 years, I was really focused on drones, all things drones. And it's interesting because that is coming back, and I'll tell you why in a second. And then basically, the second decade of my career has really been focused on self-driving cars, autonomy in cars, and the lessons we need to learn. Recently, I'm moving into, okay, here are all these lessons learned from drone operations in terms of remote operators. And this is what Waymo and Tesla and every other company are not learning, and we're having all kinds of problems. I think these companies are working hard to try to hide the fact that they need remote operators. And so now I'm just trying to shove together both sides of my career into one. Drones and self-driving cars, there's a lot in common between the two.
And is that also, I would say, the focus of your lab and your research at GMU? Does this sort of when automation isn't so automated or it automatically does the things we don't necessarily want it to do?
Yes, I spend a ton of time looking at the human machine interaction, but I will say, first of all, I direct a lab, which takes up a ton of my time. I don't have nearly as much time for research as I used to, but even when I do research, I'm starting to really try to really look at some fundamental assumptions, whether it is why is computer vision so brittle? If anybody follows me on social media, you know I love to jump up and down and tell everybody that Teslas will never, 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 never be real self-driving cars because they insist on taking a vision-only approach. And I know that because I work up to my elbows in computer vision, and it's just a very wonky technology, and I'm trying to fix it. Similarly, in other forms of AI, there's a lot of assumptions that get made when AI is built, and there's all different kinds of AI, but academics are really bad at not questioning their own assumptions and trying to look at some of the basics. And so I'm trying at a very fundamental level to fix some of the problems and some of the mistakes that researchers are making when they first create models, which will then only get the mistakes will only get worse and get exacerbated by uncertainty in the real world, for example. I'm trying to fix that.
And if you're worried about how academics perceive the subject, what about lay people? Like, what do you think is the current state of AVs and what does the average person not understand about them?
So when we say AVs, if we're saying self-driving cars, I would say the number one myth is that they're not actually self-driving, that every self-driving car company, and even ones that are pretending to be self-driving car companies like Tesla, need remote operators. They have to have human input to operate successfully. Now, whether that's remote driving, which some companies use, and remote assistance, which other companies use, the fundamental fact of the matter is self-driving cars in the world could not operate without human babysitting. So it raises a bigger question. You know, when Waymo loves to say that our cars are better than human drivers. And then I say, but there's because that's humans helping them. So what you're saying is humans helping our cars do self-driving are better than human drivers. So, I mean, it doesn't really make sense what they're saying.
And I think lately, this teleoperations factor has sort of started to creep into the public perception. We've had the power outage in San Francisco, the Santa Monica school incident, the Austin emergency responder blockage. Is that debate finally, coming to light? Are people thinking about this now? Like, how do you feel like the state of play is?
Well, when you talk about lay people, I think it's interesting. There are real lay people, people who really don't care about any of this. And then there are informed lay people, right? People who kind of following self-driving and see what's happening, but they're not investors. And
They're just nerdy enough to
yeah,
follow along.
that's right. That's right. And I do think that those people are starting to realize, and it's not only self-driving cars, Tesla was infamous for using teleoperation to power its Optimus robots, which is still very much true. Indeed, I don't want to pick on Tesla because that is true for all humanoid robotics research. It's not nearly as far along as people want to believe it is. They want to believe some of the cool, sexy demos, but that's just not reality. So I do think that people who care about the self-driving car industry, they want to believe that the teleoperation or the remote assistance, it's just temporary. It's just a Band-Aid until we get some more, a little bit, just need a little bit more time to mature the technology. But I do not see a time when we cannot use human babysitting for the foreseeable future. We're just going to need them. I'm not saying we will always need them, but for like at least the next 5 years, I do not see a way without them.
Yeah, and so I suppose, there's some companies that have based their entire business model around teleops, like, they're proudly saying they're teleoperated. Is there an inherent problem with teleops? You had some interesting thoughts on, let's say, median latency. Can you kinda get into that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm sorry to sound like a mean teacher because I am. Uh,
That's what we brought you here for.
I mean, median latency is a joke. You just can't say it. The only kind of latency that matters when we're talking about self-driving or really any kind of remote operations of any robot is max latency because that's what's going to kill your system. And median latency is, when I teach my students how to lie with statistics because you really need to understand both sides of the fence when you learn a technology. You need to know how people are lying to you. And median is kind of the big flag for how you know that somebody's trying to manipulate the data because
Yeah,
they're
and for the people following along, so the latency in question is basically the idea that your car gets to a red light, the image of the red light goes to the teleops person in the Philippines, they make a decision, they then send that back to the car. So that time is the latency, and then the median is the idea that if you've done this, let's say you've done it 3 times, and one time it took half a second, next time it took 1 second, the third time it took 100 seconds, the median number would be that 1 second, but it would be hiding a terrible outlier, right?
That's right. That's right.
I still remember some math, that's great.
Yay! Yay! Your
Thanks for
professor
bearing with
should
us,
be proud.
listeners. But I suppose, when you say it like that, it seems so obvious. Why do you think regulators have been so hesitant to make policy that kind of stipulates the can and can'ts around this?
Well, currently, there are 0 regulations around the remote operations of any vehicle. That is true in, the FAA. It is true for surface transportation, and I think that all the transportation agencies are just trying really hard to get their arms around what is this new beast and what kind of delays should we consider to be acceptable? In aviation, I was at a meeting not that long ago, and the FAA says we're not even going to start thinking about putting those regulations in place for drones until like 2028. So it's very hard to do, and the FAA it's just kind of said, okay, we're just going to push that down and think about it later. I don't even know of any efforts inside the federal government, and certainly under the Trump administration, there will be 0 efforts to formalize the regulations behind this. The only people that I'm aware of that are even thinking about it is California.
Are there other particular questions you think that you have recommendations on, or whether like they should have driver's license, should they be in state? Like, if you had like a blanket one sheet on this is what you should do.
Well, I have written recently an article for IEEE Spectrum that gives you the 30,000-foot view about the 5 lessons that you need to know about remote operations for self-driving cars. I'm about to release a conference paper that is a more detailed version of that, but it's pretty straightforward. People need to know about latency. They need to be thinking about the interface. It does matter how you design an interface to help the remote operator do their job. You need to understand workload. Waymo says that they have one person controlling 29 vehicles. China says they allow one person to control 3. So one is an order of magnitude more than the other. Who's correct? I mean, it's not a quick and easy formula, but I suspect that the Chinese are probably more correct than Waymo is. And you also have to think about contingency operations and plan for them. And I think this is one of the things that was kind of inexcusable for the power outage that happened in San Francisco that left all the cars stranded. That was entirely foreseeable. So
Yeah,
I think
a
that
power outage in California, like who could have imagined that?
exactly, exactly.
I suppose yes. It's a lot of it is almost feels like unforced errors where it's like you really didn't see this one coming, really. And I suppose maybe that speaks to how lax the regulatory environment has been.
Well, I think it's 2 things. I think that there are no regulations, and this is all new, and nobody likes to be a regulator that's doing something that no one has ever done before because if you step too far out in front, you're definitely going to get shot. So nobody's anxious to do that. But I also think that companies are in a hyper competitive environment and they don't want to have to spend any more money than absolutely necessary so they can get these systems across the finish line of IPO. I think that's what's
Sure.
really driving all of this is that Waymo very, very much wants to get to their IPO and have a warm and fuzzy. And darn it, if it's those silly remote operators are keep dragging them down and they know that they won't be able to do an IPO until they get these things at least calm down a little bit.
What about, stepping back to your pilot days, are there particular experiences you had that inform your current research or worldview?
Well, I saw a lot of people die needlessly. So that
That'll
definitely,
always leave an impression.
yeah. And in ways that just didn't have to happen. And if you don't understand, companies who take these financial shortcuts, they always like to shortchange the human operator, the poor human operator, to get to the cool hardware. And I think this is a bigger problem that cuts across all industries. It's especially bad for the government. People love to invest in the physical thing. It's not as cool to invest in the hardware. I think that the new love of AI might be changing that a little bit, but still, people want to invest in data centers more than they actually want to invest in the creation of the software. And I think one of the big problems that is not on the minds of most people, even the senior decision makers in government and industry, they tend to think of the acquisition of AI as a one-time thing. I'm gonna get my ChatGPT Pro, and it's just gonna be this cost, and that's it. And people don't think about upgrading to get the test
Training.
and evaluation that go the retraining of the models. It's just jet engines take a lot of maintenance. Guess what? So do all these models. And if you don't do it, you're gonna end up not only with a worse product than when you started, but again, one that could potentially have very serious consequences.
I have to imagine, without getting too far off topic, you must have some strong feelings about the current government's plan to basically put ChatGPT in, no human in the loop killing machines.
I mean, I've written several articles about it, and again, it's no surprise. I mean, they're idiots. This is the idiocracy. I mean, it's the worst possible idea. You can't put technologies that are so unreliable, particularly with novel scenarios, never before seen situations.
Sure.
And
Outliers.
yeah, and it's the fact that people don't realize that it is such a bad idea. I think that's what worries me most because it means that, look, I don't expect Trump and his cabinet to have a very sophisticated view of AI. I mean, they didn't grow up with it. They're just, you would not expect any administration to be super competent in AI. But what I do expect who to be competent in AI are his younger advisors and people who are around advising senior officials on this. And I do think that we are seeing a lot of problems with either advisors who should know and don't know, or advisors who have a financial interest in a particular tool and want to push that tool at their own financial gain.
How how could you imply such a thing about the current administration? Yes, it's pretty daunting and terrifying, and someone will definitely get hurt. Shifting back to AVs for a second, robo taxis. I'm curious, in sort of like a final thought way, is there a sustainable path forward in your mind? Is there a way that these companies could prosper while still, following the rules that you'd like to see them follow in a regulated environment?
Percent. I mean, people think I am some kind of Luddite or negative Nelly about these technologies. That is absolutely untrue. I have a teenager who just took out my brand new Honda Passport with a mailbox. It's amazing how much damage a mailbox could do. So I am currently really wishing that self driving cars were here. That being said, I do think that the best, what I call concept of operations, the sweet spot for AVs going forward are going to be multi people movers, shuttles, little vans, buses. Moving more than one person around with a self-driving car just makes a lot of fiscal sense, especially in light of how expensive remote operations are and the train and the retraining of the models. And it takes a lot. You have to wash these cars a lot, for example, to make sure that the sensors are working at top capability. And as we've all read in the papers, you also have to have a bunch of people running around shutting trunks and shutting the doors. And so there's no end of money that you're going to hemorrhage if you're going to be doing care and feeding of AVs. And so to me, the most financially viable model is if you're moving lots of people around at one time.
Sure. Amortize it over more passengers, and also obviously it has urban benefits in terms of not just being more cars with one person sitting in traffic.
Absolutely. Look, I'm a big fan, like, remote operations I don't want anybody to, misunderstand. They're good. They are the reason that the United States has the most effective drone air force in the world because we have the ability to do remote operations to express our objectives in the way that we need to. Remote operations are not bad, but I think what the self-driving car industry needs to do is, first of all, put their big boy pants on and realize you have to admit it and be more transparent about it because look, if the airlines who have dispatchers, if their people have to follow government regulations and have to be drug and alcohol tested, have to be physically present in the United States, if the airlines as a commercial transportation industry have to be regulated, where does Waymo and any other self-driving car company think that why do they think that they should get to dodge that bullet? If they are going to operate in the big leagues, they need to act like it.
Sure, sure. Well said. I think on that note, Missy, thanks so much for chatting with me.
It was great. Anytime.